Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. One of the comments and laments that I've heard most in recent years, both in my role as a pastor and personally, is how difficult it is to have conversations with people you disagree with. The gulf can seem so wide and it requires so much energy and patience that it's just sometimes for people easier to avoid talking about anything meaningful. Many tend to just avoid people or groups altogether that they disagree with, or only talk about more surface level things. There have been unwritten rules in the past about being polite, like don't talk about politics, religion, or money at the dinner table. So it's easy to assume that things are always worse today or things are always unprecedented, but that's not entirely true. It's always been hard to navigate difficult conversations. Most of us can think of a tough conversation that we've had in the past, whether it was with a friend or a family member or perhaps a coworker or a neighbor. Maybe you had to find a way to ask for some kind of change or share how a comment or action was hurtful or just unhelpful. So this isn't entirely new. But on the other hand, for many, there is an added layer of stress these days. It's one thing to disagree about outcomes or strategies or policies, but it's additionally hard when there's no agreement on simple facts, especially when they relate to life or death matters and core values at the heart of our life together. We all have to be willing to acknowledge basic truths, even if they may not always validate our own viewpoint, if we want to pursue truth and build a meaningful relationship with someone else. So how can we learn to reset the way we engage in conversation? Is it possible to bring your own valid insights, beliefs, and values to a conversation and represent those in a respectful way without checking them at the door? We should make space for relating to one another as human beings beyond our passionate views. It's okay to create space for that. Each of us has a dignity and worth that transcends our opinions and beliefs. And yet, to place those important things aside entirely doesn't allow for the kind of deeper connection that so many are craving today. If a relationship can only exist by avoiding critical problems or experiences that are important to you, then that relationship also isn't really honoring fully that either yourself or the other person. And that's where I think we struggle. It's one thing when you disagree about what restaurant to go to and you choose to put the issue aside. It's another thing when an unresolved disagreement directly impacts your livelihood, your human rights, or even your life. So many of those critical conversations we struggle with have to do with political or social issues today, but they can just as easily involve more personal or even professional issues. Regardless of who we are or our situations, I believe we all long for more meaningful conversations and relationships today. On some level, we're all seeking some sense of assurance of shared values and that we can trust others to care about us and our neighbors, even if we might disagree on how to get there or some of the finer points. During the season of Lent, we're going to be taking a close look at a series of critical conversations in our gospel readings each week. Most of them involve Jesus somehow. Not every conversation may be a model for how we want to approach a conversation with a neighbor or colleague. And we're not going to cover every facet of healthy conversations, but we'll have an opportunity to reflect on takeaways and what might be helpful and what we might want to avoid. So I hope you'll join us over these next several weeks And the first conversation, of course, has to be the most epic of all. It's Jesus and the devil, good versus evil, so let's dive in. It's hard to imagine a higher stakes conversation, and yet what I find interesting about it is that the tone of their exchange seems kind of almost a bit ordinary. The words expressed might be provocative, but you might even describe their tone as cordial at points. We have to notice first that this is an exchange initiated by the devil. The Spirit leads Jesus into the desert to be tempted or tested. Satan is the Hebrew word for the accuser. There's a mix of scripture and Christian tradition that suggests Satan was originally a member of God's heavenly court. Satan was effectively God's lead prosecuting attorney, and it was Satan's job to test God's people. Satan unfortunately got out of hand and thought he should be running things. So here he's trying to test Jesus and either expose him as a fraud or perhaps even win him to his side. In the first part of their conversation, the devil says, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Already we can see this is a more competitive exchange. The devil isn't interested in listening to Jesus or sharing much about himself. He's saying, prove yourself. Can you think of maybe some exchanges you've had before that kind of felt like this? They don't invite much in terms of relationship or understanding. There's a win-lose element. And, we kind of expect that when it's good versus evil. But Jesus avoids the trap that the devil has set. Based on the other stories of miracles in the Gospels, we can assume that each of these kind of miracles or amazing things that Jesus is asking, or that the devil is asking of Jesus, could perhaps be done, could be produced by Jesus, but demonstrating his ability to respond to some arbitrary test or question is not what proves that he's the Son of God. It's his heart and spirit which is at the center of who he is and really testifies to who he is. And what Jesus does is something we can do. He lets the challenge sit in his heart, and then he responds from his core. His quotation of the verse about not living by bread alone is not a demonstration of his quick memorization prowess. In citing that verse, we hear what is really close to his heart. It's a statement about what he cares about. Rather than being reactive, he's proactively sharing what matters to him. He does respond to the devil's test. He's not just deflecting and looking for a moment to insert his own unrelated talking point, but he reframes the exchange and points out how the devil's command isn't aligned with his sense of identity and purpose. And I think in any real conversation, this is something for us to remember. Real connection isn't only about a series of questions and answers. It's about bringing our real thoughts and beliefs to the table, even if they may not be expected or appreciated by someone else. Sometimes this gets lost within the stress of difficult conversations. The second exchange involves another test from the devil. The devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." And Jesus said to him again, "It is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." So this time the devil isn't asking Jesus specifically to perform a miracle himself, but to rely on God to save him. It's a more spectacular ask. Throw yourself off the highest point of the temple. And by continually starting his tests with, "If you are the Son of God," he's sowing seeds of doubt. It's tempting to want to prove it. We haven't seen much of Jesus yet ourselves in Matthew's gospel up to this point, and we might even be thinking, hey, we'd like to see that. Is he really the Son of God? But again, it's an arbitrary test. How would that actually prove anything? Okay, so God intervenes and sends angels to catch him. Theoretically, couldn't God do that for anyone? If he does that kind of thing? Showing special signs as proof of identity is something Jesus will face repeatedly in his ministry, actually. Across the Gospels, Jesus performs many miracles, but people still don't believe in him. People keep asking for more miracles as a kind of sign or proof, but it really never leads anywhere. That remains maybe one of our own frustrations. I mean, have you ever shared facts or information that make a point, but they're simply dismissed? There can be a variety of reasons for that, but often if someone doesn't want to believe or acknowledge something, they simply won't, no matter how much they're shown. The devil here, sadly, is not going to be convinced no matter what Jesus does. Anything Jesus shows him as proof will only become further grounds for questioning. It's also worth noting that Jesus isn't trying to meet the devil halfway either. I mean, well, what if I agreed, devil, to jump off a shorter tower, Can we meet halfway? It's just a bad and arbitrary test to begin with. There are legitimate moments when compromise makes sense and is constructive, but some ideas are just not worth compromising about. Jesus wisely defers. The final exchange drops any pretense. It's the most aspirational and maybe the friendliest the devil appears to be. The devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he said to him, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, 'Worship the Lord your God and serve only him.'" It's almost as if the devil is saying, "What you want is good, Jesus. I believe in you. I'm sure if you were in control, things would finally be set right. Wouldn't it be good to have the power to see it all through? Just this once." Someone else might think, yeah, it's one deal with the devil. He's not perfect, but it's just this once. But of course, in doing the deal, everything you truly want will come undone. For Jesus, it would be a total betrayal of himself and his mission. Underneath what seems a friendly offer is also a kind of threat. Accept this carrot or I'll have to use a stick. This doesn't have to get ugly, Jesus. Just show me a little respect. And when Jesus says no, we know that the battle is on. But it was always on. There was no escaping that. Engaging in arbitrary tests and debates, compromising, selling out, none of that was ever going to win over the devil and make for peace. In the face-off between good and evil, it's about integrity. And more specifically to Jesus, it's about whether he will succumb to self-preservation and self-advancement, or if he will do whatever is necessary as Messiah, even sacrifice himself to stay true to his relationship with God and his mission to save us. So this might seem like kind of a strange conversation to begin our series with. In a sense, it may seem the most unrealistic of all the conversations we explore in this series. Two kind of supernatural entities, good versus evil. It's compelling, but is it the best framing for most of our conversations? And I would say, I hope not. But sometimes we do end up facing people we may think of as bad, and whether conscious or not, we tend to draw upon stories like this to frame our interactions. So that's why we're talking about it. So what I would say is that even when we face real encounters which come down to questions of good versus evil, there are two primary cautions. First, a particular ideology or action or policy may be evil, but we should use great care in characterizing people as evil. Perhaps we can leave that final moral assessment up to God, as tempting as it might be for us to determine that. We can look at people who devise and implement ethnic cleansing campaigns, for example, as guilty of evil actions. But as people of faith, we lose our moral clarity and power when we stop seeing the humanity even in our enemies. We should work relentlessly and uncompromisingly to stop inhumane and malevolent actions and policies. And there's a whole other conversation to have about what are appropriate ways to oppose evil in the world. But when it comes to our own individual interactions, we should seek to honor the humanity of others. Second, don't immediately assume you're on the good side, or at least 100% in the right. when it comes to questions of faith and living by faith, we should come back to the heart and spirit of what Jesus taught. He stood against evil and he was firm and clear without apology, but he did so in a spirit of compassion, grace, and even sacrifice. Too often people abandon the spirit and heart of what Jesus was about and instead appeal to harsh, restrictive, and dominating forms of legalism, whether religious or political or ideological. They decide they're on the good side for doing so. Enforcing rules or what they believe are moral dictates is seen as virtuous and blameless. They believe they are in a battle of good versus evil, and therefore they can use any means necessary to accomplish their ends. They can violate the human dignity and rights of neighbors, and they can eradicate people's freedom and livelihoods. This represents a kind of deal with the devil. The temptation for self-preservation and advancement is great, and in cases when people appeal to Christian faith to accomplish this, they have abdicated what's at the heart of our faith. Today, there are movements, both religious and secular, that use this reasoning. The Christian nationalist movement, which has multiple subgroups, is one of these. It's not easy, but we have an opportunity to speak with heart-filled clarity and authority about these very things, even as we see people who embrace these views as neighbors worthy of basic human dignity, and even if their actions must be opposed and stopped. We can work to share another way forward that helps create the very community and connections that we hope to see, while working for justice and peace that respects every neighbor. God shares his voice of grace with you today. The way that we choose to have critical conversations is part of building the blessed community that Jesus taught about and has first shared with us. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.